Hello, everyone. I know there probably aren't a lot of people watching right now as I start doing this, but welcome to the Justin Center podcast. I'm doing a live podcast. In the topic that I'm going to be talking about today is just kind of discussing just and Sinner, what we are as an organization, and kind of where we're going. Because I have made announcements recently about some of the things and some of the initiatives that we do have going on now and in the future. I will be looking at the chat too for those who are watching live. I know I didn't give any announcement beforehand really that I was doing this, so I don't know if we'll have many people actually watching live, but if you are, feel free to kind of ask questions. And I want to focus on, as I said, kind of us as an organization and where we're going. So this isn't so much a theological discussion as it is just kind of who we are. So what I want to do is give a little bit of a history of Just and Sinner, where we came from. I know a lot of people probably don't know kind of the background and how long we've been around. There have been people that have been with us since the very beginning, but the majority of people probably haven't been. And I know the audience has grown quite a bit just through YouTube in the last year or so. Just and Sinner as an organization, where did we come from? Where did the name come from? Kind of where did we start? Let's just begin at the very beginning. So Just and Sinner is actually it's a blog that I started in college. That's where the name started when I think I was a sophomore in college. So this would have been 2006, 2007. It was somewhere in that area. And I started a blog as a Calvinist to do a blog about Calvinism, which just so happened to have a very Lutheran name. And I think the name came from my reading The Holiness of God by R.C. Sproul, and then getting into some of Sproul's work and stuff from Ligonier Ministry. So through that, I got really interested in Martin Luther, and that's how I came up with this name, Just and Sinner. And so I think it was providential that I ended up with a Lutheran name, even though I was a Calvinist doing this blog, not really knowing what in the world I was doing. So the old blog is actually still up. You can go to justinsinner.blogspot.com. I even have a couple of my old, defending Calvinism posts on there. I think I was a little like wannabe James White Calvinist apologist or something in college, like there are a lot of, especially that age. And this was kind of the height of the new Calvinism movement, right? I graduated high school in 2005 and I was really into theology. I feel like this was kind of 2005 to 2010 was like the height of this stuff, So I actually kept my old Calvinist posts up. And the reason I actually kept those posts up on the blog was just because I knew that when I became a Lutheran, there were going to be those people who said, you just use this kind of story to tell about your past, and you probably weren't really a Calvinist. Kind of a, if you're not now, you never were thing. That you find once a Calvinist, always a Calvinist. I've run into that kind of talk before. So. Anyway, so that's where this started. It was a blog. I was writing about Calvinism, defending the 5 points of Calvinism, and bashing those Arminians and things like that. So there's the beginnings of what we do, what we were doing, or I was doing in college. So as I moved on from there, I ended up I got married to my wife, and in 2010, when I graduated from college, I pursued a master's degree. And it was after I finished that my initial goal when I finished my master's degree was to jump into a PhD program. And so I was looking to Oxford and Cambridge, and then I eventually looked into the London School of Theology, which is where I was going to begin pursuing a degree, specifically studying the doctrine of justification in Paul, in the Church Fathers. Justification was really the issue that I wanted to study at the time. And well, it turned out that I received my first call to a congregation, and I also had my first son on the way. And this was the time I was going to do my PhD. So talking to my wife, talking through things, it just seemed like starting a PhD program while I was moving halfway across the country with a new baby was probably not the wisest idea for our family. I would have loved to do it. And so, I said, maybe I need to put this off. And My wife actually had the idea, why don't you start a podcast? Because that'll give you kind of something to do, since you're not doing this PhD thing right away. It'll give you a kind of an outlet for the theology. And I was still writing at the time. But I said, yeah, I think that's a good idea. So it was 2012 when I started the Justin Center podcast. I got a question about my political beliefs. Yeah, I can address that. Yeah, you go ahead and ask questions, and I can start talking about some of that stuff too as I get through this. So it was at that point that I started the podcast. I was in my first congregation we were in rural Iowa, southeast Iowa, and I did my first podcast ever on the topic of election and predestination, contrasting Calvinist, Arminian, Lutheran views. I'm sure if you probably go back and listen to it, it's probably not great. I mean, I imagine I've gotten better at this over the years. I hope I've gotten better over the years. I haven't gone back and listened to any of the old programs, so I don't know. Maybe it wasn't that bad. I don't know. You can tell me if it was. I won't be offended. And I did some YouTube videos. I was actually looking to see, when did I start doing YouTube videos? And I have, okay, so some of you who know me know that I used to be involved in yo-yoing, like the toy, yo-yos. I was doing that competitions all across the world, did the world competition at one point. And so, that's actually where I started my YouTube channel, was to host my yo-yoing videos. Then I got into theology and it changed. I had a bunch of really bad quality videos that I deleted at some point because I thought they were a little embarrassing. I looked at, it looks like the oldest real theology video I have on YouTube is from 2013, July of 2013. So, it's like 6.5 years ago at this point. But the YouTube channel wasn't really where I focused. It was on the podcast, and kind of slowly started building an audience. So from that point, what we did was the publishing house. Now, here's kind of where the vision of Justin Center as an organization kind of came from, right? So the vision of Justin Center as an organization was, when I moved from Calvinism into Lutheranism, I had absolutely no idea that Lutherans existed. I mean, I knew it was a denomination or something. I thought they were probably a bunch of kind of liberal Protestants. I didn't think that there were any really confessional Lutherans. I didn't even know what that meant. I didn't know there were Lutheran confessions. I mean, I'd heard of the Augsburg Confession, and my knowledge of Luther as a Calvinist was like he was the precursor to Calvin, right? He wrote the Bondage of the Will, and then the idea is Melanchthon came in and messed everything up. And then the Lutheran Church followed Melanchthon. If they really followed Luther, they would have been Calvinists. That's typical Calvinist kind of jargon surrounding Luther. But the New Calvinists had done what were then the New Calvinists, had done such a good job of using things like the internet, using podcasts, having a lot of accessible books at a very reasonable price, hosting conferences. And these things just weren't there for Lutheranism. So I just didn't have anything, and I had to do a lot of work to search stuff out. Eventually I found issues, etc. I was able to get a hold of some books. I would spend a lot of money on books because they're very expensive. So it was kind of, becoming a Calvinist was easy, right? Because there were just so many resources out there, and there were people like evangelizing Calvinism to you as a Christian. And I grew up in a kind of Reformed background anyway, so I was around it anyway. But even if I wasn't, it's very accessible. There's so much out there. But Lutheranism, it was exactly the opposite. I had to kind of barge my way in. It wasn't something I would have ever found. There weren't people evangelizing for Lutheranism. I just met one guy who is OPC, who had become a Lutheran in the LCMS, and told me about Lutheranism. And I had to do a lot of research, a lot of Google searching, even find anything that was out there. So my vision for Justin Center from the beginning of, not the blog that I had in college, but from the beginning of thinking that I wanted to do something, was I want something that makes Lutheranism accessible. And I want to do what the Calvinists were doing in some ways, not in terms of the theology, but just in terms of having something accessible and having easy ways for people to just be able to find us and not have to search, but have resources. So whether that's podcasts, videos, books, all of this kind of stuff, conferences. We need to be out there in doing this as well. And it's not good for us. The Lutheranism in general is a little bit isolated in the way that we do things. We kind of do things on our own. It's our kids go to an LCMS preschool through LCMS college and LCMS seminary, and while those things are good, and I'm thankful for all that those things exist, it has the negative effect of just isolating us so that we're not really reaching outward at all. And if we really do believe that these things are true and this is useful for the church, and this is the truth, right? And pastorally and practically and as well as academically, these things are all right. So if we really believe that, we should be reaching out in the way that these Calvinists are, and that doesn't mean in the sense of having these long social media arguments about theology. It's because it's not really fruitful, but just in the sense of having resources that are out there and being available. So it's kind of always been the vision that we would have something like a Ligonier Ministries for Lutheranism. And hi, Bethany and Ardith, thank you for the comment there about confessional Lutheranism. Yeah, and I'm glad. It's always really encouraging to hear that people have found confessional Lutheranism through the stuff that I've done, because this is why I'm doing it, right? I'm doing this because there isn't anything out there, and there are some other pastors now. I mean, things have gotten a lot better, right? There's a lot more. There are a lot more options. There were a lot more people talking about this and doing this than there were at one time. And Issues, Etc. has kind of always been the exception. They've always been out there providing lots of great material. And they were the really one avenue that I found at all, other than the White Horse Inn, because they had Rod Rosenblatt, this weird Lutheran guy, and that was, that was my exposure to Lutheranism, was just that. And then I found Issues, Etc. and these other things. But it's always kind of been my vision to make this organization a real official organization, and not just me just doing podcasts on my own as a pastor. And as much as I like doing that, I do, it was always my understanding and my desire that this would not just be something that I was doing by myself. It would not just be me, but that this would be something that I'd have other people involved with as well. So kind of moving forward with this, we at one time tried to do this. Now, this was back in 2012. I started the publishing house. So the vision was the idea that, look, Lutheran books are expensive. CPH books are expensive. No offense to CPH. I've got tons of their volumes, even the expensive ones. I love their books, but they're not really accessible. They're not at an accessible price point. When I first found Lutheranism, this is when like Kindles first came out. I got a Kindle and I got a bunch of like ebooks, these old Lutheran ebooks, because it's just like I couldn't afford anything. So this is what I found and what I could read, because I wanted to devour whatever I could. And so I had these like terribly transcribed, old Lutheran books that were put into, Kindle format, and read it through a ton of this stuff. And that was just all that was there, besides like the occasional really expensive volumes of Chemnitz I would order. But you're a college student, and just after college, you don't have a lot of money to pay for those kind of things. So I wanted to make something accessible. So that's why I said, I was really edified and helped by these books I found on Google Books, just because it was the only thing I could get for free. So I decided to start the publishing house, and that's where we started publishing books. And we started with the American Lutheran Classics series. We started with George Henry Gerberding's The Way of Salvation in the Lutheran Church. And so we started with that volume, which I was given by a pastor who was retiring, and found it hugely beneficial. Updated the language, and then now we just finished that 10-volume series, and we've got other series as well. But we've done a lot. We've released a lot of books. And so at one time we tried to expand to becoming not just, me and my personal stuff, but bringing other people on board. And honestly, when that happened, a lot of stuff blew up. It was, some of the details of people that were involved at the time. And it was not the right people. It was not the right time. And so at that point, for all of this stuff that kind of went down, some of you are familiar with all of that. People that are involved in other organizations now, it just was not right, and the timing was bad. So it went back to just me, and I kind of realized that I had to be a little more discerning in where I was, and I had to be a little more careful in terms of bringing other people on board and becoming an organization. And I had to wait for what was really the right time for moving into something bigger. And so I think, and part of that was, I said, I want to make sure I finish my PhD, right? I want to be in the right place myself, where I can really do this with real qualifications, right? So, and I was ordained, but even after that, want to be in the right place myself before kind of taking on too much and having a little more time in ministry before that. So at this point, we felt like it was kind of the right time to move forward in things that we had wanted to do. So there's kind of there's the basic background, and I see all your questions, theological questions. I want to get to some of those, but before I do that, I want to kind of tell you where we're at as an organization. So where we are now, we've kind of realized, I think this is the time to move forward. And it's a time to move forward because I'm just at the point where my PhD is done. I'm at the point where I have, I think, enough people that I trust enough, that I've known for enough years, that I think will be faithful to work with, whose theology I can trust, who I think are in the right place in their own lives and theology, that they're able to really help with all of this. So this is why we've kind of launched what we did. So we've got a few things that are going on now. We've got, as you've seen probably, and if you haven't seen, make sure you do go check it out. So this is justincenter.org. This is our new website. It is not justincenter.com. Justincenter.com was the old website. justincenterpublishing.com was our old website. These things, well, okay, what happened was, when we moved to New York from Illinois, where I was pastoring, we had to shut down our old bank account, like you do when you move. And there was this auto renewal with our websites that went through our old bank account. Well, the account didn't exist. The sites were canceled. I was waiting on them to kind of let them out in the market again so I could just buy them back right away. Immediately, someone else bought them. And tried to charge, thousands of dollars for me to buy my own domains back. So that's the reason for the change. I know a lot of people have asked about that, but justincenter.org is the new site. So here are some of the things that we're working on doing right now. And you can see a lot of this on the website. So as you've probably seen, if you've looked at the website, we now have a board and we have a faculty. So the first step in moving forward was to get a board organized. And this is something that you need to do to be recognized as a nonprofit organization. So this is what we're working on right now. We've got all the paperwork, submitted to the state to make Justice Center a nonprofit. And we have a board that is put together. So as you see on the website, we have two people besides myself who are listed there on the board. We have myself as the executive director, Louis Polzin, who you may be familiar with if you've been listening for a while, who we used to do a lot of programs with, and also Reverend Matthew Fenn, who came on recently to discuss the federal vision, if you want to check out that discussion, if you haven't done that yet. So we're the board at this point. So we've made a board. We're working on doing something with a more centralized organization. No, I am not. Okay, someone asked about our relationship with 1517. We are not in touch with the 1517 guys. I know some of the guys in quite a few people in 1517. I actually worked with a couple with Scott Keith and Jeff Mallinson for my master's thesis at the Wittenberg Institute, which was a project that they were working on before 1517. So I know some of those guys. I think there are some big theological disagreements with some of the people involved in 1517 that I would have. That doesn't mean that I don't appreciate anyone there or anything like that. But I think there will be some significant differences. So something like 1517 they have Stephen Paulson speak at events. And Stephen Paulson is someone that I've been extremely critical of. In fact, a large part of my dissertation is very much critical of Stephen Paulson. So what you can see there is that in terms of the difference, because there is a theological difference there, we're more dedicated to the older Lutheran theology, the older Lutheran, more scholastic theology. So 17th century figures like Johann Gerhard. And that doesn't mean they're just ancient figures. People like C.F.W. Walther or Revere Franklin Widener or Henry Eyster Jacobs or Francis Pieper or Adolf Heinecke, these kinds of figures. And maybe a more modern living theologian that we would take after more so would be someone like probably David Scare or Joel Bierman, a different kind of theologian. They're both kind of different, but Scare is a little more maybe scholastic. But so I think our mode of doing theology and the way we approach Lutheranism is a little different from what you see in guys from 1517. And so they're going to be more in line with what are a lot of shifts within Lutheran thought in the 20th century. Whereas, in my view, where a lot of Lutheran thought has gone in the 20th century has not necessarily been good. So we're a little different in kind of where we're at. But with that being said, yeah, Rod Rosenblatt was definitely an influence on me, especially in just making awareness of Lutheranism. So, I'm not trying to bash those guys or bash Rod or anything like that. I think he was a big part of my journey just in being part of the White Horse Inn. And even just that meant that, oh, I know Lutherans exist. There's at least this guy, So I do appreciate him for that. But no, there's no association between us in 1517 there, and I don't foresee that being the case in the future either, because of some of those. I think what are real disagreements. All right, so we've got a board of directors there, and so the next step, then we've got board of directors. We're moving into 501c3 status, becoming a nonprofit. And then we've also established a faculty. Now, the faculty exists through what is called the Widener Institute. Now, if you've seen that or seen my video about that, basically what we're trying to do is this. And we're at the beginning stages of this too. So this is trial and error here. So nothing is really set in stone. We're just kind of moving into this experiment and kind of seeing how these things go. So the Widener Institute, the vision of this is basically that we want to give people an opportunity to learn at a cheap price, right? Something that's accessible. And that's always been the goal of everything we do. We try to sell books cheap. We try to offer free podcasts, free videos, all of this kind of stuff. But this is to do something a little different, which is to have live interaction in a way that you wouldn't really have live interaction when you're watching a video. Yeah, I know we've got a chat going on, but this is real face-to-face kind of live interaction. And this is something a lot of people do through conferences and people do seminars and things like that. And our thought was, how can we do something like that would be a little more affordable and a little more accessible? And so the way that we thought of doing that was having this online program. And so it's like doing a seminar or a conference, but you're doing it online. And I know there obviously are additional benefits to being in person doing something like this, but the goal is to make this accessible so that you're paying $100, which is a lot less than you'd be paying to fly to a course or take a course in person, but to give you a chance to learn on various topics for personal edification. This is for pastors who want continuing education. This is for, lay people who just kind of want to learn theology and want a place to go to be able to do that, to ask questions, to have their questions answered. So if you are interested in that and you have ideas about, what courses would be helpful, let me know. We want to hear from you. We want to know what people think, what people would be interested in. Oftentimes the things that I'm most interested in and that I'm passionate about the most, no one else cares about. This is just the way it is. I'll be like really into something. I'll do a podcast on some topic, like substance dualism or something, and I'm talking all really excited about it, and nobody listens and nobody cares because it's just me, which is fine. So but I really want to know what's going to be the most useful for you. So the class that we are starting with is my course on Lutheran scholasticism, And we're going to be studying the history of scholasticism before Lutheranism, its medieval background, Lutheran scholasticism, who the major figures are, Protestant scholasticism as a movement. So we will be talking about the Reformed figures to an extent as well. What some of the kind of assumptions are, what the philosophy is, the basic ideas behind the movement, what their theology centered on. And then from there, we are going to be moving into some of the criticisms of the scholastic movement. And that's going to be looking at people like Stephen Paulson. So a lot of the criticisms that would be probably raised by some of the guys in 1517 towards the scholastic method and way of doing things that was popular in the 17th century. So that's going to be the first course. If you have interest, please do sign up. We do have a limited amount of spaces, so we've got plenty left at this point, but I know it's over 2 months away, so I expect people won't really be signing up too much, but we do have some signups already. But if you do want to make sure you do that, sign up soon, because we will fill up. And so with that, what we've decided to do is set up a list of faculty. We're appointing faculty members, and the goal of the faculty members is to have people who are experts in various fields of theology, and they will be teaching those courses. And so the faculty member's responsibility is to teach courses, and the commitment is basically at least once a year, which means it may not be that often, because this is a thing that people are doing because they want to do it. They're not getting a big paycheck for any of this. So this is something that people just want to do. And so that's the commitment. But also, we're going to be doing more interactive and cooperative podcasts with other of those fellows. So you've already seen a couple of these. We've done recently a podcast with Dr. Greeley on divine simplicity. I did one with Reverend Matthew Fenn, who's on our board, on the issue of the federal vision. We're going to be doing another discussion sometime soon on Jehovah's Witnesses and their theology, because that's his background, which I think will be really, really helpful to listen to some of that. So we're going to be doing more in terms of incorporating those faculty into what we do, so that it's not just me. So part of the expanding Justice Center and making it beyond just my personal thing is that we've also split up the Twitter profile. So now I am at Dr. Jordan B. Cooper, and there is an at Justice Center profile, which is separate. So if you haven't followed that new profile, make sure you do that. And that's going to be kind of the profile of the entire organization. The other people involved will be working that as well as me too. So that's where we're at. And we've also got one other thing I want to mention is, first of all, we haven't appointed all of our fellows yet. So we've basically got 3 of us now. We've got myself doing systematics. We have Reverend Louis Polzing, who's going to be doing practical theology. And we also have Dr. Nathan Greeley, who is going to be doing apologetics and philosophical theology. So we've got those 3 right now. We have other spots we're hoping to fill. We need one in exegetical theology. We need one in church history or historical theology. And then we want one in women's ministry or deaconess kind of studies. So that's the goal for the future, is moving into that. So we will have more appointments and more announcements in those areas in the future. And then on the publishing side of things, this is somewhere that I really want to start focusing on a little more. And there are a few things that I really want to do. One is, there are old books that we've published that I really want to revisit and have second editions of. There are some typos, typographical errors. And the reason why there are typographical errors in our books, by the way, is that we use basically what OCR technology, which takes these scanned old PDFs and tries to convert them to a Word format. And then we can reformat it from there. And when that happens, computer recognition software, well, it's getting better, it's still a mess. So, half of the words are going to be misspelled, it's going to misread things, and you're just going through editing word by word, all of this stuff. And so it's pretty much inevitable that in the midst of that, there are going to be things that are missed. So what I want to do is go back and revisit some of those and correct some of those issues as people have pointed them out to us as those books have been released. So we would like to do that. But it will take a bit of time to get to that point. But beyond that, what we really want to do at the publishing house is move more into newer publications, not just the reprinting of old things. Well, we want to continue to do that as well. And there are plenty of other older works that we want to continue to publish. But what we want to do is provide modern resources and modern contemporary Lutheran figures and thinkers being able to write things. And a lot of this is going to be a little more in the area of practical theology. And if you've read my 2 books that I published through our own publishing house, Baptized into Christ, A Guide to the Christian Life, and then Liturgical Worship, A Lutheran Introduction, those 2 are very basic resources on theology, liturgy, Christian life, those kinds of things. So I have a whole series of books that I'm planning on writing that will be a Lutheran introduction series. One's going to be on theology, systematic theology, which is going to basically be a lay level introduction to systematic theology. I've got, that's going to be the next one, but there's a lot I want to do in terms of practical piety, in spiritual disciplines from a Lutheran perspective, what exactly that means, which will be kind of an expansion of the liturgy book. And church history. There are a bunch of other things I want to do as well. So there's that series of books. But then the next thing we really want to move on to is a series of short congregational works. They're going to be called a small book on. And we have 2 of these that are in the works right now. And these are going to be really little kind of pamphlets or booklets, not really big full-length works. And these are going to be just for congregational use and resources. And so we've got one that's on grief and one that's on anxiety that are being worked on at the moment. And so these are not by me, these are by other people. So these are just, if people are going through issues, how do we have a Lutheran response to real life issues of dealing with grief, anxiety, depression, those kind of things. But also we're going to probably, what I want to move into is some, a little book on baptism. What is baptism about? A little booklet, you don't have to read a major tome on the subject, but something small you can read. So we're moving into that. We've also had quite a few people submit manuscripts to us for their own publications, things that they would like put out by us. We've had a lot of this recently. So the point is there's a lot going on, and this is the stuff that I feel like we've been building up to for so long. And this vision that I've had of this being something like a Ligonier Ministries. Now, we're not trying to, copy what someone else is doing. We're not like, what did this organization do? Whether it's Ligonier, Reformed Forum is doing something kind of similar. We're not, I think we can kind of look at some of those organizations, say, what do they do well? How can we incorporate some of those things? We're not trying to be just a Lutheran version of a Reformed organization. Okay, that's not what we're doing. We want to do our own thing. But I think, but there just isn't anything like this in the Lutheran world. So that's where we're moving right now. That's what we're looking at. So we're moving forward with a lot of this. But the main issue right now is really funding. And, I don't want to, I hate to be the one to, ask for money and things like that. You don't want to do that. But, we do sell books and things like that. I've never taken any money for myself from any of those things, from any of my book sales. Okay. Even not my book sales, not just our publishing house, but even my other book sales. I've taken all of that money and put it back into a bank account that is only used for things for Justin Center, which means book resources, and of course, paying for, domains and things like that, paying for an editor for my books, and, editing costs can be, a lot. And our editor is very kind and doesn't charge me very much. But even so, it's a big expense. So the expenses of editing, hosting, and just the materials and resources that I need to do more programs and do more writing, because we're buying lots of those very expensive CPH books. With all of that, I haven't taken any money for myself, for a salary, nothing from my books. So with that being said, if we really want to kind of move into the next step, funding is really something that's needed. And that's just a reality, because we are going to need to pay for editing. We would like to have an editor. We'd like to have an administrator. That we'd like to, because this is a lot of planning. There's a lot of just logisticy things that needs to get done. Like we need to get book contracts written up, and we need to buy, ISBN numbers for books, which cost quite a bit of money. We want material for, marketing and advertisement, and we'd like to be able to send out mailings, and all of this is a lot of time and a lot of money. And right now it's just not there. So we're in the stage kind of thinking about the future, praying about the future, and really trusting that if God wants this to move forward, that He will provide the resources that are necessary. So, if you do have interest in what we do and you would like to donate, please do consider doing that. Also, something we would like to do is kind of reach out to congregations and let them know about our resources, who we are, what we're doing. And if your congregation has, like a mission budget or something like that for different organizations that are spreading the gospel, that's what we see ourselves doing is really missions to, I guess all over, but spreading the message of the law and gospel to whoever wants to hear it in all different ways. So that's really what we need right now. So do kind of consider that. I would appreciate it if you consider it. I mean, the goal is this, that we don't want to charge for the things that we do. I mean, yes, we've got a minimal charge. We've got $100 to join the courses. We've got to charge money for books. Some of the books, like our copy of Law and Gospel, I make, I think, 2 cents per copy because we just sell it for the printing cost. So we want to be able to do that, but in order to do that, we do need some kind of funding. So that's what we're praying for and hoping for at this point, because we do want to move forward as an organization. We have a lot of plans. And then the last thing is the conferences. So, and then after this, I will start to answer some of the questions that are unrelated to this. But as we finish up here, so the last thing is conferences. We've done 2 conferences. It was 2014 and 2015, I believe. Make sure I have these years right here. Yeah, 2015 and 2016. Okay, so I guess I'm a little off, but okay, 2015 and 2016. We did these conferences, and at these conferences we did different topics. We did the first one on the Ordo Salutis. If you haven't listened to the lectures, they're on YouTube and they're on the podcast as well. Second one was on the 2 kingdoms. We had some great speakers come in. We had Eric Phillips, who's got a PhD in church history, dealing with patristics specifically. Dr. Curtis Lyons, who's the bishop of the AALC, who's also going to be coming on for a program soon to talk about the AALC and answer some of your questions that you may have about the AALC. So we've got that happening. And then we also brought in Gene Veith, who huge influence in bringing me into Lutheranism, like many of you. Wonderful, wonderful writings. Spirituality of the Cross. It's a classic, wonderful book. His work on vocation, postmodernism. Always recommend his resources to people. So he came, and they were really great. We loved the conferences. The reason why we stopped doing the conferences is really, a couple issues. One is we ended up moving, but so that next year it became impossible. But it is, again, an issue of funding. We've got to pay for a lot of stuff. We want to keep the costs down. You got to fly people out. You got to pay speakers. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it financially. And we're really, ended up being at too much of a loss. So we want to move into doing that again. I want to move into doing more talks other places in the country. But again, we need the opportunities. We need funding to be able to do that. So with all of that being said, that's where we are. That's where we're going in the future. So I wanted to give you an update and just give some discussion about where we are and really what our needs are at this point moving forward. So I always say I'm really, really interested in listening to what you want. What are things you think we need to provide? What do you think are things that we could be doing better? What would you like to see from a Lutheran organization that you currently don't see? Maybe from other organizations, you see them doing something that would be beneficial, or things that you think we're doing that are not worthwhile. Say, why are you wasting your time here? I think this would be a lot better. Really, we're really open to listening to you guys, because the point of all of this is to benefit the church and give people what they need. And really what they desire in terms of resources. So I could do whatever I want to do, but that may not be beneficial to any of you. I don't know. Okay, I have a question. I'm going to do some question and answer here. So there's my regular stuff, and I've got 20-ish minutes. So I'm going to do just some question and answer from things that you asked, unrelated to all of the things we're talking about. So the question here, and I'm answering this one just because people ask me this all the time. Do you ever plan to write your own dogmatics? Yeah, I mean, yes. Okay. So this is kind of the obvious place, I think, where the work that I've done is going, because the thing that I've really lamented in Lutheranism today is the systematic theology in terms of our rich history. There were so many good systematic theologies. I mean, looking into the 19th, into the early 20th century, just stuff that was published in English. I mean, there are tons of them, and really good stuff too. Henry Astor Jacobs wrote two. One is really short, but the other, Starting with Christian Faith, is excellent. Joseph Stump's 1930 book, The Christian Faith, it was great, and he's got one on ethics that follows that as well. You've got the translation to English of what's it called? The Doctrinal Theology of the Evangelical Lutheran Church by Schmid. Excellent volume. Conrad Lindbergh's Dogmatics is one of the best, very scholastic. So I really like it because it's a lot of Latin and stuff. But I like that kind of thing. There's Voigt's Dogmatics, and then he updated his Dogmatics later. It passed the edition that we published, which I just found out recently. Somebody told me that I hadn't realized. But so there are all of these great dogmatics texts, looking back to from basically the Reformation on. And it's like the 20th century, when you get to 1930, it's like Stump is the last, and then it's just done. Nothing new is coming out. And I think the reason for that is people have switched into a mode of really focusing on Reformation studies and Luther studies, which is great. I think that stuff is really, really important, certainly. But unfortunately, the kind of dogmatics aspect has disappeared in some ways. And the focus has more been on, what did Luther teach? What did the Lutheran Confession say about this or that? Which is, again, really important. But that's in the realm of historical theology. And in systematic theology, there just hasn't been a lot done within Lutheranism. So, I mean, yeah, you can find volumes on all sorts of topics, but not the kind of comprehensive systematic work that was done in the past. I mean, you could find someone like Robert Jensen, but, he's not really within the kind of confessional Lutheran tradition. His dogmatics is interesting, but is systematic theology, but not quite what I would consider, a confessional Lutheran perspective at all, in a lot of ways. So very, very different. So there just really isn't a lot done. Recently, CPH did release that, and I'm looking for what those volumes, Confessing the Gospel, that 2-volume set. It's really not much of a systematic theology. It's a lot of exegetes that are talking about systematic things. If I could call it that. So, not that it's bad. The information's really good, but it's not really the kind of thing that kind of I'm looking for, right? Something like Francis Pieper's Dogmatics, but newer. So with all that being said, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of you kind of realize this is probably where my work is going. So this is, this is something that I'm going to be doing and pursuing in the future. So I have basically, I have like 3 ideas for systematic theologies. On the one hand, I've got a basic introduction to systematic theology, which is going to be topic by topic, but it's for laity. Okay, that's going to be done. I have a first chapter written. Not far on it, but there's something there. Second, I have a series of volumes which are a constructive scholastic theology. And this will be dealing a lot with philosophy and philosophical shifts today and methodological issues. That's going to be a 4-volume series. The first volume is my dissertation, Defending the Scholastic Method and Criticisms. Second volume is Doctrine of God. Third volume is Doctrine of Man. Fourth volume is Christology. So it's going to cover a lot of the major systematics categories, but it's going to be more kind of interacting with philosophy and contemporary critics and things like that. So it's not going to quite be what you think of as like a topic by topic systematics. And then what I will do at some point in my life is have something like a big volume or a couple volumes that are something in between. So something that is more of a traditional systematic theology, something that is not just really in-depth kind of philosophical things or things like that, but also not just the very introductory thing. So I have kind of 3 major plans, and these are the 3 major projects I want to do with my life. So we'll see what happens. And as long as I don't die before I get it done, which, that happens. So sorry about that. That's what happens when I do a live podcast. I don't get to edit out when I'm coughing. I had the flu for like 2 weeks, so I'm a little under the weather still, but mostly just this cough. Anyway, okay, so there you go. Yes, I'm working on something like that. All right. What did I think of The Rise of Skywalker? It's the worst Star Wars movie. I was insanely disappointed. It was very bad. I don't know what else to say. It was embarrassing. The editing was just embarrassing. It was, I don't even know what to say about that movie. People think that I love the sequel trilogy because I have like these sequel trilogy characters up there. I mean, I just like the Black Series figures. I'm not like, I don't hate them. I actually liked The Last Jedi. The Force Awakens, I thought was such a bad beginning for a series. I thought it was an entertaining movie, and like I enjoy watching it, and I like the characters. But in terms of moving the Star Wars story forward, starting back where we began was just such a weird thing. So I am really a fan of the old Expanded Universe books. That's like my favorite Star Wars thing. So yeah, I don't know. I like The Last Jedi the best of the new trilogy. The Force Awakens is an entertaining movie. The Rise of Skywalker was a giant mess. I don't even know what to say about it. I love the prequels. I don't care what anyone says. They're all good. I even like Attack of the Clones. I think it's a great movie with just some corny dialogue, and I think people shouldn't let that ruin it for them. Okay, so let's see. So, okay, that's my thoughts on Star Wars since people ask me these questions all the time. All right. I will be doing more joint videos with Nathan Greeley. Yes. I don't know what the next topic is going to be, but we'll definitely have him back on, especially as I said, he's a fellow. So any of the fellows or people in the organization, I'm going to be doing more joint videos with. I've got some other interviews and discussions I'm going to be doing too coming up soon. Like I mentioned, Dr. Curtis Lyons is going to be on the program, and I will have another discussion with someone who's pretty well known in what was the old, kind of New Calvinist group who has recently changed their theology. So that'll be a really fun discussion. That'll be coming out at some point next week. So stay tuned for details there. Okay, so let's see. Other questions that you guys have. There are people ask me about politics. I feel like I get actually more questions about politics like all the time. I'm not a political person. I want to do theology. I don't do politics. I understand that there are times where those things overlap. So I did I've talked about things like, feminist critical theory and modern gender theory. I've talked about Simone de Beauvoir and some of the kind of ideological movements there that are generally considered political nowadays. But those things really affect the church and also affect theology and who we are as human persons. So I will delve into those issues because it very much relates to theology in really, really important and significant ways. So I will deal with that. I'm very much pro-life. I think that's just been a standard Christian position from the very beginning. So I will speak out on that issue. But I've mentioned things like, Marxist critical theory. I think someone like Roger Scruton did excellent work in his book, Fools, Frauds, and Firebrands, Thinkers of the New Left. I would recommend that if you want to look into what my position is on some of those thinkers. And the reason I even think that's important that I will mention it at all is because it does affect the church. And it does affect how culture views the church and views us as Christians in the world. So those things I will touch on, and that's not going to be the focus of what I do. It's never going to be the focus of what I do. But I'm not a particularly political person, and I don't really want to delve into those issues too much. I think it's unfortunate that a lot of our debates nowadays in the world of theology, I liked it better when we were all arguing about the new perspective on Paul and justification and, yelling at each other about predestination instead of now everybody's just arguing about, critical race theory and these things. It's just not an argument that I want to be a part of. And I want to just get back to the theology, get back to the gospel. The gospel impacts all of these things. I'm not trying to say those aren't important. I'm not trying to say that that doesn't relate to these things, but that's just not where I really want to focus. And as I've mentioned before, I think the way that these debates have been handled nowadays, especially within, the Southern Baptist Convention, things are so polarized that it's not helpful on either end. And so I don't really identify with anyone in those big political debates just because of the way that things are phrased, the way that party lines have been drawn in, I think, very weird ways, the way that I think both sides are kind of intentionally trying to spur the other on. And I don't know. It's just, I think it hasn't been helpful. Okay. So I'm going to say, I try to stay away from politics. Yeah, that's just where I'm at. I have opinions on these things, but it's not, you're not going to hear me talk about my views on gun control or economics or, foreign policy or whatever, immigration. I'm not going to talk about those things. It's just, you can get mad at me about it for not taking your side, but it's not where I want to focus my time. I honestly, when people talk about politics on the radio or on the TV, I just shut off. I don't want to deal with it. Sorry, that's where I'm at. So maybe that makes me naive and terrible, but that's where I am. So I don't want to deal with it. I'd rather focus on theology, Lutheran theology. This is where my focus is. This is why I do what I do. So that's where it's going to be. All right. So let's see. What do we believe about the ecumenical councils? Yeah, so Lutherans generally do accept the ecumenical councils, at least the first six. So we accept the decisions of those councils, doctrinal decisions of those councils. We refer to them as the ecumenical councils. So in terms of things like the Christology of those councils, yes, we believe that they are right and true. The Seventh Ecumenical Council is a little bit dicey among Lutherans. So you'll actually see a little bit of disagreement in terms of what we do with the Seventh Ecumenical Council. So the position that we take at the Second Ecumenical Council has the Seventh Ecumenical Council. The position that we've come to is what some people have called the Carolingian position, which is certain individuals who kind of used imagery in worship, but really more so for didactic purposes, more than having any kind of more sacramental notion of what images are for, which you find more so in the Eastern Church. So the Seventh Ecumenical Council, Nicaea II, you are going to find some different ways of expressing how we relate to that council from people like Martin Chemnitz, who is pretty harsh in rejecting it because he thinks that there is he calls it the image worshiping council. Okay, so he does do that, but Jacob Andre, on the other hand, accepts the Seventh Ecumenical Council. So there are different views of that. In terms of the first six councils, yes, as Lutherans, we accept the Christological decisions of those councils, which really is the main issue at those councils. And then in terms of the seventh, there's a little bit of tension and disagreement there. We certainly don't agree with the iconoclastic party, but that doesn't mean we agree with, totally agree with John of Damascus and what the Byzantine party is saying in terms of their view of iconography. So we kind of end up in between there. So it depends on how you understand the decisions of that council. All right. So let's see. And I've got a little bit more time. Mandalorian. I love the Mandalorian. It's great. Anything that Dave Filoni touches is good. So I'm happy with anything. Clone Wars, Rebels, Mandalorian, anything that Dave Filoni has his hand in is great. He understands Star Wars. He should have been the one helming the whole thing in the first place instead of, Kathleen Kennedy and these people. I'm not a hater of Kathleen Kennedy, but I think that the new Star Wars in some ways has been kind of a disaster. The amount of directors that they've gone through and the amount of projects that have been started and canceled, it's really bizarre and it looks really bad. And it seems clear that they don't know what they're doing. George Lucas has said of Dave Filoni that he's like a son to him, which, you see, he gets George, and I think he gets Star Wars better than anybody else. So the fact that he's even involved, Filoni, Jon Favreau, they're wonderful. I love The Mandalorian. Can't wait for season 2. I'm excited for the Star Wars TV shows, the Obi-Wan series. Really excited about it. It sounds great from what the little that we know. So we'll see. All right. So let's see what other questions we have. I'm trying to go through the the chat here, and there's so much here. It's hard to it's hard to do this to kind of look for. Oh, people are talking about James White. James White comes up a lot, and I know that we have a lot of the same listeners. So people ask me about him a lot. it almost seems like just about every week, someone is asking James White to debate me, and I'm tagged in things like all the time about this. It seems like, yeah. So some years ago, there was a challenge for us to debate. People wanted that to happen, and this was, when I was doing a series of programs on the subject of limited atonement, kind of going through arguments. Went through James White, John MacArthur. But then some other smaller kind of Presbyterian pastors who had done some lectures on it, and I don't even remember who they all are. But things that people sent me said, "Can you respond to this?" So I said, "Okay." So we went through for a little while the arguments on limited atonement, and after that, people really wanted to. Thanks, Eric. I appreciate that. I really wanted to. People really wanted me to do a debate with him over this issue, to get a Calvinist to talk about limited atonement, and then we would set up some kind of a debate, because that just hadn't really been done. Lutherans really don't do a lot of debates, so it didn't happen. He didn't want to debate Lutherans, he said. I had a very weird experience. I have nothing against James White at all. I appreciate his things on Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnesses, in terms of apologetics. I think there's some helpful stuff there. I listened to him when I was a Calvinist. But Radio Free Geneva was something I loved as a Calvinist. It's like the go destroy those Arminians kind of thing, like people do with the Ben Shapiro clips, and so yeah, I nothing against the guy, but honestly, my experience with them was very, very odd. So when I was doing, generally, if I'm responding to somebody in a podcast, I tag the person in the podcast, because in the tweet, right? Because I want them to see, what I'm doing, because I'd want to know if someone's talking about my stuff. So to me, it's just like, okay, you want to know what they're doing. So because of all of that, I had tagged him a few different times, because I had been responding each week to a couple things that he had said on the issue. And Rich Pierce, who's his kind of guy that works with him, ended up telling me that I was a stalker because I did that. It was very weird, and I was like, okay, I'm not dealing with this weird stuff anymore. So again, nothing against James White. The experience was just really kind of weird. So I don't understand what that was about. But anyway, so people still ask me to debate him all the time. There was a pastor that asked me to do a live in-person debate with him on baptism. I said, if he'll do it, I guess I'll do it, but I don't think he will. And he has no interest, which is fine. I don't care. That's fine. I'm not that big on debates, honestly. I did one with Theodore Zechariades on limited atonement, which was, it was all right. I was just surprised that he kind of came out with a more hyper Calvinist position, which I didn't know coming into it. I don't know. It's fine. I understand I understand the use of debates to an extent. To some degree, though, I think debates are not always that helpful, because I think a lot of really good ideas and the best ideas need to be fleshed out really extensively to kind of have the ideological background of them. Even when you're exegeting a text, you need to know a lot more of the context that can really be discussed maybe in a quick debate. So I think it's not to say that they're of no value, but I think the value of debates is kind of overstated to some degree. I'm just not sure that it's the best way to deal with issues, because I would much rather see written correspondence, because you could have the right idea and be completely right in all of your arguments, but also the other guy on the other side could, the other guy on the other side could have completely wrong arguments, but be really good at arguing and really good at putting forth, some kind of like really blunt, bold statements to make you look stupid and they'll win the debate. So again, not to say that they're of no use, but I'm not sure how beneficial they are. So, I'm willing to kind of look into these things. I know all these Jay Dyer followers who I didn't even know who the guy was. The guy, okay, I didn't know who Jay Dyer was until all of these people jumped in and told me on every comment on my Eastern Orthodoxy video that they wanted me to debate him. And I don't know who the guy is. Who is he? I don't know. And people sent me videos. I said, all right, I'll look at who this guy is. The first video I go to is, I'm sorry, it's a bunch of weird conspiracy theories. I mean, the guy comes across as like the Eastern Orthodox Alex Jones. Okay. Sorry. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. And I think generally what a lot of those conspiracy theories rely on what I think are a lot of really poor arguments. So to me, if there is someone who buys into a lot of those ideas, it says a lot about how they argue. It says a lot about their thought process. And, I see a lot of kind of imitation in him of the kind of Alex Jones mode of just like mocking people and attacking people. And like, I'm just not into that. And I'm sorry, it's not what I do. So I don't know what you want from me. And then his response is to call me Soy Boy on Twitter. Dr. Soy. Okay, that's great. That very, very helpful intellectual argument. So like, I mean, come on. When you're doing, like, I do this stuff in my free time. I'm taking a basic lunch break to record this right now, early lunch break. But I do this stuff in my free time. I don't even have time really. So, I have to limit what I can do, and responding to people on YouTube, some guy who I don't know, who I haven't seen, any kind of scholarly publications or anything worthwhile. I don't have the time to do that. And I know people say he has a big following. That's fine. Alex Jones has a huge following. I think he's crazy. I mean, like, just because somebody has a big following doesn't mean they're worth talking to. And this is true with anything. I mean, look at the music that is the most popular is pretty terrible. Okay. This is true about popular art forms, the popular YouTubers. This is true about popular things in general. Because something is popular doesn't mean it's good. Okay. And so, yeah, people are making comments about Jay Dyer's things here, and it's what it looks like. Someone sent me these screenshots of him where he refused to say that he was going to be cordial in a debate. I'm like, oh, it's not worth it, okay? And people call me a wuss and soy boy because I'm not going to debate this guy. Look, I have no obligation to debate anybody. Okay, this is the same. I mean, it's true. If James White doesn't want to debate me, he has no obligation to debate me either. So don't bug him about it or anybody else. If you do what you want with your time, and there's no obligation to say, I'm going to debate every person that ever comes my way and says, I want to debate you, especially because I'm not a debater. It's not what I do. I'm a theologian. I like to discuss issues. If you want to see something that I really like doing that I think was more beneficial is, I don't even know if you can find the audio anymore. I had a link on my website, but I think the audio was taken down. But I did a discussion with a guy named Jeffrey Johnson on who wrote a book on believers' baptism from a Baptist perspective. And we had this kind of discussion back and forth on points. And I thought it was really constructive. It was really helpful. We listened, talked through ideas. That's the kind of thing I would much rather do. I'm not sure that just this combative me versus you yelling match and name calling on the YouTube live stream, I'm just not sure that that's really helpful. It's just not what I want to waste my time doing. Anyway, we'll see what kind of Jay Dyer people start saying insane things to me after this. So maybe I shouldn't have said that. I honestly, I started blocking their comments on my YouTube videos because they were spamming every video with all of this crazy stuff and disliking all my things just so I wouldn't debate the guy. It was weird. I've never had an encounter with followers like that of anyone. It was completely insane. I'm sorry. It's completely insane. So, do what you want. I've apparently lost all of my credibility as a human being because I won't debate Jay Dyer. So whatever. Okay. Yeah, someone said the debate format allows people who are mostly spectators to watch their guy win, and I think that is the case. Now, I have, I did make this comment, and I know Khalifa said to me, "Look, I really did change my view because of a couple debates I watched." There probably is a place for that, but for the most part, a lot of debates are really just to kind of cheer on your own side and watch someone destroy somebody else, so you can feel like you're on the right side and they're wrong, which is just not that helpful. So. Anyway, not really what I'm about, but I'm always open to doing a debate if you really want me to, but it's got to be really worth the time. Okay. Anyway, yeah. People people keep sending me stuff by those crazy guys, the Diamond Brothers, those weird Sedevacantis guys to debate them or something. I don't know. Anyway, weird stuff. So a lot of weird people on YouTube, and a lot of great people on YouTube too. But the great people are the ones that are not yelling at people in YouTube comments and sending their followers at YouTube comments. So, yeah, anyway. Oh, someone says, yeah, honestly, after watching James White's debates against Catholics, I didn't feel it was a spectator sport. Yeah, it kind of depends on what the debates are. I think if you watch the debates that he did with someone like Mitch Pacwa, I thought they were pretty good, pretty helpful, because Mitch Pacwa was just a really respectable guy, it didn't come across that way. I'd say when you listen to James White versus Robert Sungenis, it doesn't come across that way. It just depends on it really depends on who the people in the debate are, I think. Sometimes it can be really constructive, really interesting, really helpful dialogue. But sometimes when people are, like Sungenis is the name, he's always name calling. So like, and the guy's a geocentrist too. So, but it just ends up being not helpful. When people are just angry and yelling at each other in a debate, that's when it's not it's not helpful to anybody. And from what I see in the Jay Dyer stuff, in the way that he's responded to people like Eric Ibarra, who I don't know too well. He's my friend on Facebook, and but just like some of the stuff that I've seen him say, I'm like, what is wrong with it? This is just nasty, like bullying. It's weird and dumb. It's childish. Yeah. So whatever. Anyway, I did see that actually James White was responding to Jay Dyer's video. And it was after I did the 5 reasons I'm not Eastern Orthodox that Jay Dyer released that 10 reasons I'm not Protestant, which I assume because he was talking all about my video, and this came out right after that. This was a response to that. So I saw that James White did a response to that, which I looked at a little bit, but I'm kind of curious, actually. I should make sure I do that. Okay, so let's see. How can I become a Lutheran? Someone asks. Yeah, I got to sign off in a minute, but yeah, Lutheran, you join a Lutheran church. Go find a good Lutheran church. Find a confessional Lutheran church. If you're in the United States, I'm part of the AALC, the American Association of Lutheran Churches. We're very small, so you may not be able to find one of us around you. But there are Lutheran Church Missouri Synod congregations all over the country. So I'd check out one of those. Or there's also Wells, Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod. There's also ELS and others as well. So I would recommend going to an AALC or LCMS congregation and checking those out. If you're not in the United States, I would look for the congregations or the denominations across the world that the LCMS is in fellowship with, because there are lots of great confessional Lutherans all over. And yeah, the AALC is in full fellowship with the Missouri Synod as well. So our home base is actually on Concordia Fort Wayne Seminary. So we have a good working relationship with them. We're just really tiny. So they're much, much bigger than us, but it's all good. So I am just going to stop now, I think, because it's been over an hour and I got some work I've got to get done. But yeah, thanks all for everyone who was watching and everyone who is in the chat. So I really appreciate it. Oh, if you want to become a pastor, if you're interested in the AALC, you can go to alts.edu. You can check that out, which is a seminary I teach courses at. So I teach the systematics classes. Otherwise, you can go to on campus at Concordia Seminary in Fort Wayne, Indiana, or St. Louis, Missouri. Anyway, all right, guys. Well, thanks so much for watching or listening, if you listen to the podcast, and we'll see you next time. God bless.